4 days of the U.S. Open at the great Los Angeles Country Club, right in the heart of Los Angeles. And somebody who was covering it as well is Brody Miller, the golf and college football writer for The Athletic. You can reach him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. I'll just start right here, Brody. Your thoughts on the U.S. Open, the 123rd edition, we'll get to the winner in a second, but just your overall thoughts and pictures of what this year's U.S. Open looked like.
Yeah, of course, and thanks for having me. It was a very strange week. I mean, I think this was probably one of the most anticipated, exciting U.S. Opens in a long time because everyone was excited to see this course that was always so well thought of and, highly rated, but no one had ever really seen, let alone on television. And it obviously has been, all things considered, a disappointing week. I think it was you start with two guys able to shoot a 62 on Thursday, kind of got things off to a rough start. Then you add in the just kind of strange crowd vibes. And at first, I think they were getting credit for the fact that it was only 22,000 people there. But then I think as the week went on, it was just, you realize as more information comes out that the overwhelming majority of those went to members and the club to hand out, and only a smaller amount were for just normal GA people, and that's where most of the excitement comes. That's where most of the buzz is coming from. And then, they didn't allow a lot of grandstands and fans around the 18th green and 9th greens because they, I think they wanted the clubhouse to be the background. Well, that's where you need most of the excitement, and so it just felt empty and awkward on the biggest hole of the course. So it was a very weird week. And I think the scoring conversation is an exhausting one, but one that I'm always happy to have, because I think that did end up finishing around where you wanted. I do think the final scores were pretty tough and competitive and par golf, but as an overall event, you hear a lot about battling between the USGA and the LACC. I just think it was a stressful, weird week, and I'm going to be really interested to see if they really follow through and have it here again in 2039.
Yeah, I saw that. They'll be back around here 2039 when hopefully the LACC is in rotation. But Brody, when it comes to the winner, Wyndham Clark, a guy who had just had one PGA Tour victory coming into the U.S. Open, and he walks away as the champion, battling toward the end and then sinking a putt to keep Rory McIlroy from getting his first major in 8-9 years. What do we know about Wyndham Clark now? Where is this taking us? Is this the PGA Tour's new star?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if I'd go as far as new star, but I do think he's a guy who is here to hang around. He's not going to be just one of those random, major winners that we get every few years, and you're just like, remember that? I think he's going to be around. He's going to win more tournaments. I don't know if he's going to become a star, but he's fascinating because 3 years ago, he was not even in the top 200 golfers in the world. He was a really big amateur prospect and dealt with the loss of his mother and dealt with some struggles there. Came up, got his PGA Tour card, and just flat out was not good. It was like he missed 7 cuts in a row at one point, and he was not even in the mix. And he made some changes in the last 2 years, and it's kind of quiet, right? I don't expect everyone to know his name, but he has quietly been one of the better golfers in the world the last, 12 months probably. He won the Wells Fargo, which was an elevated event. That's against the best guys in the world. He's been, raking in top 10s and top 20s at pretty big tournaments. And it's like, I'm not saying he's some star, but he is, in the FedEx Cup rankings and things like that. He was a top 10, top 15 guy this season. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. I don't know if he's going to be, some great guy for the next 10 years, but people should get to know him because the year he's having right now with these 2 massive wins, he's probably going to be playing on the Ryder Cup this fall. That feels very, very likely at this point, probably assumed. And he's a fascinating guy because he has dealt with all those things. He has dealt with loss and struggle and just kind of, he said he was ready to quit golf multiple times, just kind of hopping in the car, driving, not knowing where to go. And I think that's what makes this such a cool story, is that as much as I think golf, we all want stars to win the big events, it's kind of cool to have a guy who, just went out and earned it when other guys couldn't.
That's a great point there. Speaking with Brody Miller, golf and college football writer for The Athletic. You mentioned it there. We're all about the stars, right? And I had a chance to be at LACC, and, you're watching the Schefflers tee off. You're watching, obviously Rickie Fowler and Rory McIlroy and some of the greats. Who do you think was more of a disappointment this week? Was it Rory not getting that next major, or Rickie Fowler, who's playing in Southern California near a lot of his hometown fans, and both guys just come up a little bit short?
Yeah, right, because Rory is like, that's the answer, because Rory, I mean, people have just, it's so bizarre that what he is doing in majors year in, year out the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, is out of this world. I mean, he is playing like, in majors, honestly, like the best golfer in the world. The fact that he's getting top 5s and top 10s this steadily in the biggest events, it's like, that's the most impressive thing. You know how good he is, and he is so beloved, and everything that's gone on with LIV the last 2 years, and the role he's taken in the game, and how good he is at talking and being around people. Everyone wanted him to win this. Let's just call it what it is. I mean, the golf world, golf writers wanted him to win this. And I think it is just so disappointing that, and what makes it so strange is it's not like he's going out and choking. St. Andrews last year, right? Yeah. He didn't choke at St. Andrews. He just couldn't quite hit that like big birdie putt he needed to, and then Cam Smith took it from him. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of what happened today too. He played well. I mean, other than maybe that 14th hole where he put that ball in the bunker and missed that putt, I think that was the one obviously that he let get away from him. But other than that, he hit fairways constantly. He drove the ball out of his mind. He put the ball on greens consistently, and he just could never make that like 15, 20-foot putt, that 10-foot putt for birdie. He just couldn't make any of them. And again, that's what's, I think, it's not that he's losing it. It's that he's lacking that ability to just go grab it, to go take it. I know it's not that simple, but sometimes Wyndham Clark just went out and grabbed it and took it. I think that's what people are hoping for out of Rory McIlroy. And with Ricky, it is disappointing just because how much, and you were there, right? Like that crowd wanted Rickie Fowler. Like,
absolutely.
That crowd was in love with him. They were chanting Ricky and other vulgar chants too. They loved him, and I think it's disappointing. It's tough though, because not like anyone expected him to win this, right? The fact that he's having this bounce back year and playing as well as he has all season long, really, that's enough of a big story for Rickie Fowler, I think, to have his game back. It is a bummer that the crowd didn't get a kind of embrace him, but I think Rory is who people will be talking about for the next, few weeks.
Brody, has the PGA Tour and LIV talk sort of cooled now? You had that initial like bombshell, and it was like kind of earth-shattering a little bit, and now it just seems like, for me, the last 4 days, that wasn't the conversation. It wasn't the LIV Tour, it wasn't the PGA Tour, it was just the U.S. Open, and it came down to the final hole, which I think ultimately is what the fans want to see regardless.
No, you're totally right about that. I do think, and we all kind of wondered going into the week, like, how much will that be a distraction? I think the consensus was what's happening here, right? It's when the balls start flying, it's just going to be, wow, we have a golf tournament. And I think you're right today, where people were able to enjoy it a little more, knowing there's no longer a war going. And I think that's been the case with most of the majors, that like we've been able to just enjoy them, but there was still that background, like, wow, Brooks Koepka won it for LIV and all that stuff. And I think this week it was like, oh, Cam Smith and Dustin Johnson are making runs, and LIV wasn't even really part of that storyline. And that is all no matter your thoughts on the proposed, joint venture and all that, and you're allowed to be angry about it, that is better for golf. I completely agree. But the sad, I don't know if sad's the right word, but the interesting thing will be that, yes, this was a great weekend of golf. Now it's going to go right back to being the main storyline, because, we are going to start getting more details about what it looks like. Jay Monahan, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, just had to step away with a health scare. The U.S. government, the Justice Department, are going to be looking into whether this is violating antitrust issues and all of that. It's not going anywhere, is the crazy thing. But yeah, you're right. And as much as I said LACC was kind of a failure in some ways for the U.S. Open, we were fortunate to have a really great tournament, though, and a very fascinating result.
Brody, I think always interesting for me is that when you look at when these tournaments sort of take place, obviously I'm talking about the majors, right? The Masters, generally in April, right around Easter, right? Then you have the PGA Championship was in May. Then June, we have the U.S. Open on Father's Day. And then we know coming up next month, we'll have the Open Championship. Is there a way that golf can maybe try to spread these out a little bit more instead of just having them back to back to back? It's like, I was still recovering from Brooks's win at the PGA Championship, and then here we go. Here comes Wyndham 2 weeks later. It's like, it feels like everything is so rushed, and I always felt like they could spread it out just a little bit when I feel like golf is starting to take that momentum back.
I think you're right that it's taking momentum back, and it's not a bad point, but yeah, it's happening rather rapidly. I don't think they will ever go away from the one a month thing. I think that's always just kind of worked for them. It's good for eyeballs and all that. But no, you're not wrong. I mean, the fact that, this week is the Travelers, which is, whatever tournament most of the time, but it's an elevated event this week, as you know, which means all the best guys have to go. And that means Rory McIlroy just told this crushing defeat. Now he has to hop on a flight across the country to Connecticut to go play in a tournament that he probably doesn't want to play in. That is kind of a wild, aspect. And as much as I don't think they'll go away from one major a month, and plus the PGA Tour and that doesn't even have control of that. I do think, what happens in the next few weeks with when the schedule comes out for what this new joint venture looks like and what all that is going to be really interesting to see how they map out schedules, how they try to balance it out. So like you said, own the calendar more. And I think that's so important. I think, and then you have the FedEx Cup, which will take over all of August, and that'll be the big thing. And fall golf is always just kind of an off season, if we're being really honest, other than some small events. Do they try to spread things out and get more going in the fall? Does LIV become more of a fall concept or something? I don't know. But to answer your question, I don't think they'll ever change that, but I do think there's a conversation to be had.
We're speaking with golf and college football writer for The Athletic, Brody Miller. You can reach him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. You mentioned that fall golf is probably not a thing because we know what's coming up in the fall. College football, Brody. We already know what's going on. And I was talking to the guys a little bit earlier. I saw something over the weekend, and it didn't look right. It didn't feel right, but it's happening. And I saw USC recruits taking pictures in the USC uniform without the Pac-12 logo, but with the Big Ten logo. Like it's starting to hit me that in one more season, this is like the last college football season upcoming of, I guess, in its purest form before we got to get used to realignment as we head into this college football season, which obviously is the next one up, the next big season that's going to start. What are your top storylines as we start to prepare for the 2023 college football season?
It's tough, because so many of the biggest stories of college football, like you said, are what are coming in 2025 or 2024 and how it's going to change. This season, though, it's going to be I'm all in on this year because two of the programs, that I think we all collectively assume are top 5 teams, the defending champs, Georgia, Alabama, those are two programs that are in not rebuild, but they're reshuffling. Yeah. They're losing both the quarterback, both coordinators on both schools, and I think that's undervalued how much continuity matters in college football and how much, hey, it's okay to lose one of those things. And I assume both those teams are going to be really good because guess what? They're Bama and Georgia, right? But that's not going to be just some simple thing. I think both those teams lose at least one game this year, maybe two. Wow. What happens with the LSUs? A team that is very deep, is very experienced, has some really top-tier talent, some guys coming up. Is that experience more valuable than the talent of an Alabama, even though they're, more inexperienced, things like that? I think that's, the juicy thing to me, but also that quarterback race of Caleb Williams and Drake May. I want to watch that. All the eyeballs on Caleb Williams this year, but don't forget about Drake May. So I think those are the things that really jump out to me.
Last question before I let you go, Brody. We just saw Wyndham Clark take the big tournament, right? The U.S. Open. He's like the big star now that everyone's going to be talking about. When we get to the upcoming college football season, outside of Caleb Williams and Drake May, who I've both seen play, who is that big star that you think no one's talking enough about, but could have a huge, huge season and everyone's talking about him at the end of the year?
Ooh, should we have some fun and go defense? I think I'll go Mason Smith and Harold Perkins at LSU on defense. Mason Smith's the guy who should be this year's, Jordan Davis or this year's Jalen Carter. He is a 6'6", 300-pound freak, and he was going to become it last year. And then the first half of the first game of the year tore his ACL. That guy could be a top 5 pick if all goes right. And I think he's going to be a big name. And the world already fell in love with Harold Perkins last year, but now they're going to really follow it because they know him. I think Harold Perkins, what they do with him, he's moving inside linebacker. He is one of the most explosive players in the country. I think I'm really just excited to watch those guys play on top of, some other guys maybe on the offensive side of the ball.
Oh, man, I can't wait. Gotta wait. Oh, can August get here? Finally, Brody. All right. Please.
So soon, man.
Hey, Brody, I appreciate the time, man. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.